Welcome to you all on behalf of the Publications Office of the European Union. Thank you to come in to this second eSender workshop of this year. So we're now running them 4 times a year, every season, to keep in touch with you all, as you are very important partners to us, as you provide the bulk of the procurements notice published on TED. So this morning, the agenda, the structure is pretty similar to what you've seen before, the same as we did in March. I will make the first presentation about the business issues, and Yanis, my colleague, who you also know very well, will present the more technical issues, which is mainly about SDK2 today. So as you've noticed, all your microphones are off. That's to make it a bit easier to manage. But please come to Slido. There's a link in the chat now, or you can get the QR code or just go to slido.com and enter eForms 2025. It will take you to the Slido page we have. So you can always ask your questions there. If you've got very long questions, you might put them in the chat, but we'll privilege the questions from Slido first. And we'll take all the questions at midday in 2 hours' time after the presentations. So we'll answer them all in one go. If there's any time, say after my presentation, before Yanis's one, we can try and catch a few of them, but we'll probably go straight through and catch them all at the end. So keep asking them as you go along, and we'll deal with them later, as chronologically. Okay, if we do have more time right at the end, we could open the microphones. If you've got any particular issues, it's an opportunity to discuss, but we'll see how it goes. First, we'll work through Slido. Okay, if you're on Slido, we have a couple of questions for you just to get us started and make sure you're connected. So the first question you should be able to see is, how hot is it for you? So at least around here, around the Luxembourg region and neighboring countries, it's been pretty hot. I know it's quite hot in different parts of Europe, but you can start putting your questions. Just let us know how you're doing. So too hot, yes, that is very hot, too hot. Raining in Belgium, okay. No surprise. Air conditioned, that's good. Some like it hot. So we see quite a range. Yeah, 15, 12, 21, and then some at 34, 36. So yes, we have a very diverse continent. Vienna's boiling, fire. Some are cold and rainy. I want rain. 14. So I think we have a bad distribution of heat. Some are fine and some are not humid, but it's generally hot. Normandy is a place to go, it seems. So we'll be coming to the beach there, but not, I guess Vienna beaches are not quite so good. So that's great, just to check the temperature at your end. And we have another question for you. If we go to the next one. So we know you've all been busy updating SDK versions. Some of you are still very busy doing it, but most of you have moved on at least. So we're just curious what you do when you're not doing SDK versions. I know we've been keeping you busy on that. Just know what else you do in your systems. Do you catch up fixing all the stuff you haven't got around to doing because of SDK? Or so find SDK bugs, okay. Doing some things for the user functionality, features, improving innovation, do new things. Maintenance, UI, quality, e-tender and usability, features, SDK bugs, yes, that seems to be what you're finding now. Extending the platform, evolving it, improving the UI, or explaining eForms to user, Okay, yep, so we're getting back to try and bring things to the user which are not directly related to the SDK. That makes sense, yes. It's good we have a bit of a chance to catch up now, and as we'll see in a moment, the SDK rhythm is a bit more manageable now. So I'm glad that you'll be able to focus on users. And indeed, we've noticed that as many of you move to SDK 12 and 13, you've been finding issues with the SDK, which you might not have noticed before or revealed themselves with 1.13. So helping the users is good. So let's see what else we can bring to the users, which through the SDK or beyond. Implement voluntary forms, indeed. You could do 1.13 and you could phase in the additional forms based on 1.13. So that's indeed streamlined tailoring. It's less complicated now. Okay, great. So yeah, thanks for your replies. It's good to get a feeling of what you're doing. I'll start my presentation now. So the sooner I present, the more time we have for questions, which is usually the most rich part of our sessions. So you should be seeing my screen there. Yep. And I will present. Yeah, okay, you see my screen. So as usual, I present the business issues to keep you up what's going on there. So indeed, a hot spring. This is a snapshot of the Copernicus surface air temperature from a couple of days ago. Already heating up. So if you want somewhere cool, you can see in those maps where it might be slightly cooler, but it's pretty neat up. And I was thinking that it's probably been quite a hot spring for you if you've been upgrading, keeping busy. And it's still quite warm, but hopefully we got used to the temperature, at least of SDK versions. So I'll go through where we've been, where we're about to go to, and what happens beyond. So this is a thermometer where we are. So starting from the bottom, SDK 1.10 and 1.11. This is also so you get a feeling of who else is out there in your peers. So who else is moving. So we have a few eSenders still on the old SDKs, which ends in a bit more than a month's time. A good chunk of you have moved to SDK 1.12, and the biggest number have gone to 1.13, which makes sense because that was available and they have longer lifespans. So if you're on 1.12, you've got another year on that, so you're doing fine. If you're 1.13, you've got, I would say, getting on for almost 2 years on 1.13. I put March 2027 at least because we'll see later that the third amendment might take longer. So for as long as we don't have newer SDKs, we keep the current ones active. So that's the approach we'll have. So many of you managed to move off 1.7, 1.8, and 1.9 at the end of April and May. That was busy around Easter for you. You moved on, and a couple of you have asked to have a little bit more time for 1.10 and 11. So we pass that on to the Commission, and we should get a decision in July if there's more time. So the requests are in. Don't hold your breath too hard. It won't be a very long extension, but that will be discussed case by case. Okay, but also when we ask you to register, we asked you what were your biggest challenges. So the ones that come up again and again is what changed in an SDK. So that's your biggest challenge every time you move. If you came from something like 1.7, which didn't have many rules, and you moved up to 1.10 or 11, and you got snowed under by all the changes, that will be very hard, especially if you're not metadata driven. And even if you are metadata driven, you still have to look at them, even if your implementation is lighter. And if you have product owners or functional business users, it's quite difficult for that those parts of your teams who have to understand the rules as well from a business point of view, which have an impact on your products. So that's something we have to consider on our side. And then the other ones, I think, also apply to you more broadly. So if you're metadata driven, if the metadata changes, it might not be backwards compatible as expected. You need the time to fit it into your systems. That's something we also see when you are editing an SDK version, or you're changing it, or you continue the procedure. There's a difference in SDKs. The XML doesn't convert naturally, so it's an effort for the user. You have to handle that case somehow. How you handle lawfulness, we'll see that later. Selection criteria that changed in 1.12, so that actually removed a field for the first time and added other ones. So that might have not played well with your systems. And then how you fit things into your UI, and also requested more examples, maybe more specific examples. So this is what we need to bear in mind when we have new SDKs on our site, see which ones we can do. So I would say breaking news. We will have an SDK 1.13.2 patch. So we had a 1.13.1 that came out quite quickly after 1.13.0 because we had the EU financial regulation. It didn't concern you particularly. But normally we have a new SDK and we backport the important parts, a handful of cases. But some things cannot wait. So SDK 1.14, it's for after the summer. Our plan is to have a patch in the next month or so. And why is this? Well, there's one big reason that came in only last week, but we knew it was coming, is there's the first international procurement instrument measure has been adopted. So if you think back, the international procurement instrument regulation was published in 2022. We set up the fields in SDK 1.13, but there are actually no measures adopted, the implementing measure. So everything was sort of on standby, but that got adopted last Thursday or Friday, and it concerns Chinese medical devices. So this limits how European buyers can deal with tenders from China for medical devices. So that's there's a guide which is prepared by DG Grow, by the European Commission, to explain how it can implement it, the logic behind it. So you can follow that link later. And practically, as you are all implementers, what you want to know is how does that affect you? What that means is that we will add the option true. This says IPI applies for this indicator. So far, we only had one value in that code list, which was false. And because it was false, nothing else was possible. So the fields were there, but they were locked because no rules allow you to go any further. We had a code list we had created to hold each measure. So in future, there might be more than one measure. So every time there's an implementing act, there will be a new measure. So this is how we'll add them in future. We had a placeholder called empty, just a bit. We will move that placeholder and we will put in, this is actually the SELEX number of the measure itself. So it's regulation 1197 of 2025, if you're able to read that structure. So we'll add that measure in the code list. So the users will say, yes, IPI applies, and I will use this measure. There's only one for now. And then behind there's already the existing fields saying if there are exceptions or not. So there's 4 IPI fields, which you will already have there if you're on SDK 1.13 anyway. And there's an additional rule, which means that this particular measure for medical devices is limited only to the certain CPV codes. So we will just check then, are you using those CPV codes? Yes, then you can apply the measure. If you're not, you cannot use that measure. So the CPV codes are related to medical devices. So that's basically, we were making IPI active with this patch. So on our side, if you send something with these values in CVS, they will come in. If you haven't implemented yet, nothing changes because you just don't send the IPI fields. So again, there won't be millions of notices coming through here. It has to be a procurement of more than 5 million. So not everyone buys 5 million euros of medical devices. So it will be relatively rare, but some of your buyers might be asking you, can we do that in the next few months? There was also an omission in the view templates in SDK 113, which wasn't showing the new fields exclusion ground source and selection ground source, selection criteria source. So normally we would have waited till 114 and then backported it. As we've got a patch, we're going to put it in now because it's quite a high-profile omission, and many of you have noticed it, and your users are confused when they preview it. If you use the render API on TED, it's okay. So if the data is there, it's published okay in the official journal. There's no problem there, but it's more for your previews of your users. So it's adding to a lot of confusion. And then also, I would say this is also breaking news. As you know, defense in Europe is a huge topic right now. And some of the actions that are happening at European level is there's already a regulation called Security Action for Europe. And there's going to be another regulation in the next couple of months for the European Defence Industry Programme. So here you've got a couple of acronyms to add to your acronym soup. Effectively, what these two regulations say is saying you can have a contract modification for the Defence Directive, the 2009 one. So Defence Directive is a little bit older than the other three directives, 2024. It doesn't conceive of contract modifications. So we created a voluntary notice E6 with 1.13. So even if there was no legal basis for contract modifications for defense contracts, you could use E6. What these two regulations are doing is effectively legalizing contract modifications and making them possible with the legal text. So effectively E6 is no longer voluntary, it's just going to become a normal contract modification if you're using Directive 2009-81. So the simplest thing is saying, well, you've got E6 already, but we'll just remove the label to avoid any confusion. It's just a regular contract modification. And too bad that it's called E6 and not 41 or whatever. It's just a number. We don't care. Yesterday was a discussion with member states, and if you haven't implemented E6 and you're in a rush, we will also allow to use Defense Directive as a legal basis for notice subtype 38. So 38 is the Directive 24 contract modification. You will have a couple of more fields, but it's very, very similar to E6. So when we created E6, we based it on 38. There's not much difference, so it's okay. So we're saying if you've got E6, use it. If you don't have your E6 and you're in a rush and some of your users want to have contract modifications for their defense contracts, it will be possible to use 38 as soon as the patch is out. So what do they look like? The contract modifications will be exactly the same as you do today. There's no change. It's basically you take your result, something is changed in the contract, you go to the modification section and you fill it in. So from a practical point of view, it's just like using E6 today. There's no difference. And then if you happen to use 38, it's the same as using 38. There's no thing. It just means that it formalizes the use of contract modification for the Defense Directive. So those we want to make available by the end of July, so you can use them if someone needs them. And if you're using Vue templates, you'll benefit from that if you use the render API. But we have a bit of a bonus. We have a bit of a conundrum we want to check with you. So in the eForms annex, again, in contract modifications, subtypes 38 and 39, BT 720 tender value was mandatory. So everyone had to fill it in. As people were using the SDKs, I discovered a case where it shouldn't always be mandatory. So if you're in a framework agreement, you don't always want to put in the tender value. It's no longer a tender; it's a call off from a framework agreement. This is part of the general weakness of eForms and framework agreements. That's a more general issue. But from a practical point of view, you say if you're in a framework agreement, you don't have to put in the tender value. So what we intended to do with SDK 113 was open this up possibility so that buyers were not stuck saying, what do I put into this field? It doesn't make sense. Can I do it? We're going to implement them as manual schema turn rules. I think for performance reasons, this would make it possible. But we accidentally omitted them, so we forgot to put them in. So having removed the fact they were mandatory, we wanted to make them conditionally mandatory. But because the condition got missed, tender value is now always optional. So basically in 113, we are not respecting the eForms annex, which means they should be mandatory. And even the condition that makes it mandatory in most cases is missing. So we've opened a door that we now want to close. So we're going to ask you, we have three options. We can add these the schematon rules in the batch in 113.2. That's in a way, the quickest and simplest. So they're just there. We close the door, and SDK 113 is correct again. We can wait till 114 and then backport them again. So effectively the same thing, but with a bit more time. Or probably the worst option from a rule point of view and from a content point of view is we only fix this in 114 and we don't touch 113. So it means that 113 forever, tender value, well, forever, for the next couple of years, tender value will be optional, which means we will get bad data. So I had a quick look, and already 2% of contract modifications fail to enter tender values. And it's not because they're framework agreements. So we're already getting some weak data. Admittedly, most of them come from e-notices too. So that it's kind of good. It means your systems are possibly have these rules that make tender value mandatory somehow, or your buyers are just a bit better accompanied by your systems than with e-notices too, which doesn't have much. There's no e-procurement environment around it. So if we patch 113 now or in a couple of months, it would basically be breaking up principle that an SDK patch doesn't untighten the rules. So the question we'll have for you, and we'll ask it in a Slido question at the question time around midday, is what is your preference? So have a quick think about it in the next hour or so, and let us know when we have a Slido question at question time. So I would say our preference is to patch it now or at the very latest in September. So we don't want to leave the store open. We have the rules ready. We want to put them out. But it's more like, can you imagine what effect it might have on you? Okay, second. So 114. If we didn't have a patch, this would have been the main conversation. As I said, I didn't actually mention it explicitly, but at 114, we want to have it ready, I'd say more by late September, have the release candidate. Because we have these decisions that only came in yesterday, so it gives us time to do it. We also have a colleague who's off sick, so that slows us down a bit, and he's a key person. He's doing better, but he's not with us just yet. So he'll be back, but not in time to help us with everything. So that slows us down a bit. But this is the scope we have. So the member states, and some of you in this meeting were also there yesterday. It's the expert group on e-procurement. It's member state representatives. This is run by the European Commission. So this is more the decision-making body or the consultative body that feeds into eForms. So when we make changes to eForms, we consult with them for all the business and policy issues. There was a workshop yesterday, which, for example, discussed the IPI that we saw earlier. And there was also several issues that have been proposed to them to discuss and to decide. So there's like a governance structure to decide these things. The Commission has a GitLab project where you can follow those links. The presentations will be online later today. You can follow the workshops. You can see the issues that have been discussed. You can potentially give your opinion, even if you don't, as it were, you don't have a vote, but you can at least give an opinion of what you think could be there if it's not, so it's not secret, it's transparently decided. So these are decisions we got yesterday, and the rules we will implement in 1.14. So we just make sure the nuts code and country are consistent. That was kind of obvious, but we don't do it today, so we get some weird data. There is a guide on tender statistics. So these are the values: how many tenders did I receive, how many are SMEs, how many are from EEA or not. So there's a bunch of different questions. Currently, the rule is you must provide at least how many tenders did you receive. And that particular value, how many tenders did you receive, is really important from a policy making point of view. So did you have single bidders? Was there competition for this tender? So as you can imagine, competition for tender is one of the big, it's a big deal in procurement. That's almost the reason we're doing all of this. So it's a clarification of how to use statistics. In practice, it probably won't change too much of the rules we have. Maybe clarify the labels. So it's a good clarification. The SDK impact might be actually quite small because we've got some rules in place already. So that's not a big thing. This one is also fairly obvious. We have in a couple of subtypes the number of framework. The number of participants in a framework is a maximum, and it's mandatory, and that's confusing because you don't, most of the time, you don't specify this information, and everyone is having to put what is the maximum. So people put, I don't know, 10 million as a maximum because I don't know how many tenders I'm going to get. It didn't really make sense, so we'll make it optional. And now I think about it, I'm wondering if so that will make life easier for your users. Fit in a field that doesn't make sense. Another useless field in competition notices, for some reason the annex said you can indicate if the procurement's going to be relaunched. It doesn't really make sense. You're just launching a competition. We added a rule saying you can't tick this unless you're in a change or something. It's kind of pointless, so that will disappear. One confusion less. There was a broad discussion about changing the code list by a legal type, especially if there was like a 2-level of classifications. And the other decision was not to change that classification, but there is one entry which doesn't make sense. It's group of public authorities. That doesn't make sense. A buyer has its type and it's not a group. So if there's a group, there's just multiple buyers. So that will be removed. And then a discussion, the amounts, we will limit them to 2 decimals, just to make sure that people are putting meaningful amounts, and pretty much in all currencies of the world, it's 2 decimals. From dinars come at 3 decimals, but they're pretty rare. The decision to make these monetary amounts always positive, we propose to make the amounts should be positive. It kind of makes sense, but there are some cases, it seems, where there might be negative values. So as we couldn't get a decision yesterday, this will be decided later. So some of the values could be negative. We wouldn't apply the rule, but some of them we probably can apply the rule, but it's not going to be for 1.14. This takes more decisions, so we postpone that one. We also propose to make the eSender rule mandatory. So most of you are doing it anyway. I suggest you use it anyway, because this allows to query your data on TED to see who is sending what. So some member states want to know who is sending notices in my country, apart from me as eSender. Some of you have like a monopoly, and this allows you to query TED directly. So we always recommend you do it. But you'll see in the third amendment, we're going to have a broader discussion about all the roles in general, and we'll come back to what is the eSender role. So those, I would say, these are the business decisions that involve the member states, but we have a bunch of other changes, more incremental changes that we do as housekeeping, just to improve SDK in general. So I'll go through them quickly, but check that an integer is an integer, that you have whole numbers, because today some people put weird numbers that don't make sense. Some buyers putting huge numbers that again don't make sense, so we'll limit those. This was actually a bug, BT33. I think was mandatory in some cases. So we're just going to make it optional. We loosen it. We want to, if there's a group of buyers, we want to know who's the leader. It makes things a bit clearer. There's some white space corrections you might have seen. And the transport forms T1, T2 are getting some improvements. So most of you don't use this, but I think in Germany they're implementing them. So they've discovered some gaps which we hadn't provided. So this is good to tidy it up. EU financial regulation will drop, so that's not your problem. And then generally improving the view templates or type definitions, code list translation. So any feedback we've got and improvements. Our plan is to group all of this in, so that maybe in a month's time, we can publish like a release note, and this would be the scope. So it's very clear what's coming in a couple of months later. So you can see things coming. So, okay, all the important stuff you should all see here, but if you want to already looking at smaller stuff, at least you'll know what is in the pipeline, and you don't have to wait for the release candidate to discover things. Okay, and then looking beyond SDK 114, it's the third amendment to the eForms regulation, and this is quite ambitious. So these are all the things that could be changed, and most of them, or almost all of them, will also be discussed with the member states. So this eForms workshop, which is managed by the Commission and the member states, will go through all these proposals and see which ones get implemented. So this is the menu. It's pretty big. I don't know if we're going to manage them all. There's a lot of ambition. You've seen some of them before, but every time we look, the list gets bigger and bigger. Some of them already have an issue, so some discussions are already ongoing. So these are the ones on the left. You can follow them if you want to see where they're going. They're not necessarily that advanced, but we'll keep working on. And some are not listed yet as issues, but they're also the ideas which are out there, and we'll see which ones go through. Which means that the original plan to have an adoption of the third eForms amendment by the end of the year is just unrealistic. So currently, the Commission are thinking more to have an adoption in March 26. So this year, for the rest of this year, prepare these issues, define what needs to be changed, discuss them, have a guide in some cases saying this is how you do this. So it's all clear before we put things into a legal text, and we can go ahead. From our point of view, us and then you, going ahead means we will have an SDK. So if the amendment is adopted in March 2026, we need time to do all of this because there's a lot of changes out there. I mean, schema changes, there's some pretty big schema changes in there. Removing rules, adding rules, moving things around. There's a lot that might come out. So we need a few months, but these would come in what would be SDK 2.1 next year, and I would say probably the second half of next year. So that's why SDK 113 and SDK 114, 13 and 14 would need to be available to you until well into 27, because if you only have SDK 2.1 in 26, you need at least a year to move to it, because this also will hit you quite a lot to make all these changes. So we have a bit of a calm before the storm, but the idea is that we can transparently show you what's on its way. For example, one thing we learned yesterday is that there will be an amendment to the Defense Directive. There's an omnibus called Defense Readiness, which omnibus means it's a collection of different legal acts that would be changed, and they all move together. And for example, it would increase the thresholds for defense procurement to make it easier, to have fewer rules, or to add the possibility to have dynamic purchasing systems in Defense Directive. From our point of view, you and us, at first look, it would mean that the forms for Directive 81 would look a bit more like the newer directives. So for example, the field that says this is a DPS or not would appear in the forms of defense forms. So we're thinking the structures won't be very radically different. We'll just be making more fields available to them. So if it's like that, the impact is not too bad for us. But obviously for the users, if they're setting up a DPS in defense, that's a big deal. For us, it's just a tick box, so not too bad. So lots of changes. But I won't go through them all. Presentations, you can see it later, just to keep up, because we're not there yet. Hopefully in next workshop, we can tell you more which ones have advanced, and I give you more details. Okay, and then looking even further ahead, as you know, there will be a new EU directives regulation. It's still not clear. It's very likely the 3 existing directives, the 2024, and probably also defense. There's a lot of desire to put it into one directive, so you only have one legal act that covers them all somehow. I stole these 2 slides directly from my colleague in Did You Regard the Commission, but it summarizes where we are in the discussions and the aims of this legislation. So right now, the Commission, DigiGrow, are evaluating hundreds of pieces of feedback. Some of you might have given feedback. So there was a public feedback, there were targeted consultations with certain groups. There's at least 5 evaluation reports, so evaluating the 2014 directives and say, did they work? Did competition improved? What went well? What went not less well? It's a mixed picture. So the 2014 directives had some improvements, but not necessarily. The public buyers, have a mixed opinion about whether they were better than before. But all those lessons have to be fed into the new one, and then there's some big cross-cutting things. So one thing which is new and would be difficult to agree, but is requested by member states, is to have like a European preference. So you choose to buy European, so you can't discriminate against non-European ones. Then making sure that you have the supply, that you can buy strategic information in EU. It's also a bit tricky. Simplification is the one everyone agrees on. So it cannot get more complicated than it is now. That will help everyone. And bringing things together, so consolidate them again. And also, there's a nice slide that shows all the, I didn't put it here, but it shows all the procurement directives. And then it shows all the sectoral legislation that interacts with procurement. Like we saw, IPI is there, Foreign Subsidies Regulation, Clean Vehicles Directive, Energy Efficiency Directive, and there's dozens of these directives. They say, oh, when you do procurement, do this. It's not always well defined, and there's always an impact on procurement. So you have to update our systems. We change the SDK. We add a field here and there. It's a lot of change, which comes in from other regulations, which are not the directive ones. So how can that work better together? That would really help all of us to not be constantly changing just because there's one regulation that shows up with something about procurement. And there's a discussion: are we publishing notices because we want buyers and suppliers to find each other for the internal market, or are we doing notices for reporting? As we see, they're pretty heavy on reporting, which doesn't necessarily bring any value to the buyers themselves. It just brings values to the policymaking, which is very useful, but the buyer themselves doesn't benefit from that. So our colleagues in Brussels have a lot of work, and normally a legislative proposal would come out the second half of next year. So bringing it together, so a lot of work. So, but yes, in practice for us, it's still a few years ago, but we can dream of a simpler future. Okay, so okay, a bit of housekeeping between all of us. So I think, yes, we sent you an email yesterday. You should have got it. Or those of you who are registered in the developer portal, there's been a contact. As you know, in preview, when you send notice in the preview environment, if it triggers lawfulness or there's a workflow error for some reason, they get stuck in lawfulness in preview. Our colleagues are not busy validating or rejecting them. They just get stuck there. They neither get published or not published. So from time to time, we tidy it up. We last did it in December, and we switch the status of all your notices that might have got stuck in a status. So your notices are stuck in submitted, and they got lawfulness, and we'll just switch them to not published. So you could continue them or so on. I saw some feedback about could we improve something in preview. Okay, we'll look at lawfulness as one case. In preview, so normally when it is submitted and it's okay, there was no warning or error. At 3 o'clock, they switch into publishing status, and at 4 o'clock, there's a fake publication on TED, so they switch to published status. Except for these ones, they get stuck. If you do want to test lawfulness, you can get in touch, and we can reject or accept, so you can test that workflow if needed. But generally, this should be okay. And the other thing we consulted with you in the past couple of months was the synchronization time between TED and our back office system, and then e-notices too. It says, when is my notice published on TED? From now on, we will start checking at 4 o'clock in the morning. Check it's on TED. If it's published, we update it. We change the state to notice too. You can query it, and the buyer, or whoever you put as the notice author, will get the emails. So those emails and notifications will start at 4 in the morning. Currently it was 8:30, it was a bit late. On TED, just to remind you, TED publishes the official journal at any time after midnight. And most days, by 0:30 in the morning, by 1:30 midnight, the official journal is already online, it's on TED. Our contractor who run TED, they actually have until 9 in the morning to get it online. So at the latest, the official journal will be online at 9. So if you don't get anything until 9, it's not a problem. It's only a problem if you get nothing after 9. But at 4 o'clock, almost always, things are fine, and you can start getting that get that feedback. And we found 4 o'clock was a sweet period because you might have some processes that run in, and then at 4 o'clock you start getting some feedback. The users get their emails, and by the time everyone wakes up, everything should be fine. Okay, finally a point about lawfulness rules, because we got several questions that the rules changed in SDK 1.13. So indeed, our rules for lawfulness are pretty blunt. We have some very basic rules saying if the buyer is outside of lawful countries, so outside of EEA, Canada countries, there's a list of lawful countries, we check them by hand. So if your embassy sends us a notice from Bangkok, we're going to check it because it says, I don't expect anyone from Thailand. I'm going to look at them one by one. That rule hasn't changed particularly. We check this little form called call for expression of interest, which none of you should be using because it's reserved for the European institutions, but some buyers pick it, so we reject those ones. But the biggest change that you will notice is that we used to check, it was a rather stupid rule, but we check for the word sale in English because we don't publish sales, and that wasn't very useful. But we noticed that some eSenders or buyers were sending test notices in production. So we put up a nice preview environment, people ignore it, they test in production. That's no good, and we have published some stupid notices because they say test notice and out it goes, and we cannot check the content. So we've added a rule where we noticed everyone was putting test in the organization names. So we have a rule saying if your organization name includes a string test, we will check it manually. We had a quick look of how many cases that would affect, and it's a couple of cases per week. So you might have organizations or companies or buyers nationally who have the word test in their names. Not all of them get published on TED. We had a look. Some of you said, but I've got lots of people called test something. They're not all coming through at EU level. So don't worry too much. The volumes are not too bad. Lawfulness warnings never block submissions. There was one eSender where the developers had assumed lawfulness was an error and didn't submit. It says, no, you submit, you just get a warning. So make sure your applications handle that case, or they discovered it with 113. And my colleagues who check them manually, they always check what has come in lawfulness just before the export, just before 3 o'clock, saying if anything's just come in, we have a quick look and we approve them. So pretty much everything gets checked in the same day. There's no delay. And it's 2, maximum 3 per day. It's not too bad. But have a look at the discussion, because I gave more background about this. And also, thinking ahead, we want to have more sophisticated lawfulness warnings, get some algorithms to help us check the content. So I think I mentioned it before. So we want to have more lawfulness warnings. So my main message is make sure your system handles more lawfulness warnings correctly. That user not surprised, but we want to check more things manually. For example, does the notice match the language you've declared? We want to read those. If you say it's in French and you sent it in English, we will reject it and get you to correct the language one way or the other. And then look at the content. How similar is this content to something else? Is it rubbish content? Is it test content? We're going to have like some sort of confidence score and get humans to check what the algorithm has picked up. It'll take us a while. It's not for this year really, but just so you know, that's where we want to take lawfulness warnings and give it a better name than lawfulness, because it's more like a confidence indicator warning. Okay, almost finished. Good. So a couple of dates and activities for you. Our colleagues in our unit who run the TED website, where all your notices are published, are running a usability study now. So please go and fill it in anyway, because maybe you don't spend all your day on TED, but you know procurement pretty well, so your opinion is valuable. It's your notices, and you might want to have an opinion of how they can be searched, how they can be found, how they're displayed, and other things in TED. It takes 3 to 5 minutes to fill it in. It won't take you long. But we're encouraging, we're trying to also get eSenders as a, stakeholders, and would like some volunteers, if you're interested, to actually spend more time than 3 to 5 minutes this week or next week to actually test the website. So you have a scenario, click through, and a usability contractor sees what paths you take and what could be improved, and card sorting. So that's like moving things around so that they make the structures better for you. And then after the summer, there'll also be some focus groups, like interviews and seeing what's useful. If you got a survey and at the end, there's an option, give me your contact details. I'm willing to participate more. And then our colleagues can pick you up and maybe try to invite you or not. So depends a bit on your profile. We're trying to get certain style, but eSender is one of the personas that have been checked. So please go. If you just go to TED, it's in the banner on TED. So you don't, this link itself goes direct to the survey, but go to TED in the banner. What's next? So eForms workshop, as I said, that's the member states. So a bit of like the decision-making body for us. And there's one in July, there's one in August. So there's a bit of work through the summer to get started on all those issues for the Third Amendment. So 114 is clear. Next step. eSender workshop, will meet again at the end of September. So by then we should know what's in SDK 114. Hopefully we'll have a release candidate, or it's imminent. And we might be able to give you more feedback on what's coming up beyond that. Again, no fundamental thing. And then I think it's just when the Christmas market opens in Luxembourg, we're going to have our second TED Together event. So it's a couple of days in Luxembourg. It's also online if you can't make it, but if you can make it, it'd be great to see you in person. And we bring together the eSenders, the data reusers, and the ESPD and e-procurement ontology communities together. So basically everyone implementing, dealing with stuff, all our partners together. And if you have something you'd like to share, please let us know, because pretty much whenever we do a Slido, and I saw even in the commission, the member state or the non-publications office or non-commission presentations tend to be rated higher. So when you speak to each other, actually you appreciate it more than when we speak to you. It's a one-way street. So come along, your presentation will be popular. If you've got anything you'd like to share, especially anything cross-cutting. It goes a little bit beyond pure eSender experience. That's very valuable. Okay, so thanks for your attention. This is the usual list of connections, how you can reach us. Yeah, there's a few issues on the SDK discussions we're trying to catch up with. Again, we're a little bit understaffed, so please bear with us. Or the help desk for more business, functional, operational stuff. Have a quick look. Okay, we've got lots of questions. Whoa, okay, I can't answer them very well, but okay, I just see one release candidate 1.13.2 available soon. I think we'll go straight with a patch about 1.13.2 in about a month's time. So just give us time to put it together. You probably see it. Yeah, we'll probably have a release candidate first, so you might see it in GitHub. I'll come back to them in the afternoon. Yeah. So that's probably better. I think it's probably better if Yanis, if you're there, you go straight ahead. It's 5 minutes early, but that's fine. We tackle all the questions at the end. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit early. So just so our presentations will be online later today. This session is also recorded. The recording will come out, and then we'll have minutes later on with all the answers. But I'll hand over to you, and I'll stop sharing. Okay. We can see you, and we can hear you. All yours. Thanks, Yanis.
Thank you, Carl. In a second to share my.
Just speak up. Your microphone's a little bit distant. That's okay. Just that's okay. But keep it close. Yeah.
Let me see if I can share my presentation. Is my screen shared already?
No. We see you. Yeah, not the screen yet.
Okay. Second screen share.
Yeah, that's good. And we see a little you in the corner. Perfect.
Let me get these things out of the way. Or you don't see the floating window, right? Oh. Okay, good.
We see a floating you in the corner.
Just me, yes. Okay,
yeah.
not yourselves.
No. Yeah.
Good. So, hello everyone. Nice to be together again. Like I said, let's talk about SDK2. This is the thing that we're focusing on currently, at least in my side of the team. I'm going to read you my slides. I'm going to speak to you a little bit as freely as I can. My slides are more detailed so that you can look at them later. So, as Carl said earlier, we want to keep SDK2 fully compatible with SDK1, except of course FX2. So we'll reduce the changes only to the points where FX expressions are used. I will give you details in a while. We want to complete the work on the business entities for SDK2. I know that some of you are worried about business entities. We will cover that in a minute. It will probably not be completed when the SDK2 is released. Not probably, possibly not be completed when the SDK2 is released. But in general, this would be used extensively in SDK2. Also, the field analysis, I talked to you about them in the past. They are about making expressions more readable. I'm sure that, and I can see it in many colleagues, they know the different field names by heart because they used to work with them so much. For me, it's almost impossible to understand what a field name means without a dictionary. So I really look forward to be able to switch between names that are more friendly. And possibly we will include some additional file formats while maintaining this backward compatibility. We'll talk about it in a minute. I've talked to you in the past about the features of SDK2. So, okay, of EFX2. So, yeah, okay, it would be more expressive and easier to read and easier to write. So the way it turns out, the template part is already much more powerful template language. We use the experience that we got from EFX1 and to adjust everything after August 22. You know that this that was released under pressure. So we're trying to take our time now and create a more robust and a more rich language that will allow us to deal with visualization better. We're going to better deal with unpublished fields. We're simplifying the syntax, and we're adding features that will improve their performance. And of course, the dynamic rules. We can talk about specific features as we go along. Today, the point where we are today is we're almost done with the changes that we want for the EFX template part of the grammar. There are a few things to still do there, but we're currently in a position to work on creating the actual templates in FX2. So that's good. And next month we will start working on dynamic rules and also an extension to the grammar that will allow us to express the rules fully in EFX. Currently, we only have conditions and some assertions in EFX, but we would like to be able to express the rules fully in EFX so that we can process them better and not only give you schematrons, but give you an engine that will be that can be used under different execution environments other than schematron. What else? We're starting the work on recreating the view templates in EFX2. We're about a month behind where we hoped we would be, but the schedule is still to release in the fall of 2025, either together with SDK 1.14 or just after, soon after. In any case, we will release an SDK Alpha 2 in the coming week or two, and a new alpha version of the EFX toolkit and the notice viewer. And we hope that some of you at least will have the curiosity to have a look and provide us with feedback. Although the thing is very much work in progress, but so it's an alpha version, but any feedback is always welcome, of course. What do we need to do more? Okay, in FX templates, we will add, we will break it down in sections so that we can include in one view also the summary, apart from the main section that we only have now, and also include the navigation. Currently, in that viewer has to do some tricks to provide the navigation menu for the main section. So we're going to sort that out natively in EFX so that the viewers can use all these different visualizations at the same time. We're working on a way to make the rendering of unpublished information easier without having to write all this complex EFX code that we have to write today to deal with unpublished data. We'll probably also add an EFX1 to EFX2 translator so that an expression can be moved easily from EFX1. And also a translator that will replace fields with aliases in an EFX expression. So to make it more readable or more usable, depending on the user that looks at it. Like I said, some people prefer to look at business terms. Some people, like me, might prefer to look at a name that makes more is more descriptive, makes more sense. Also, we need to start working on the EFX rule syntax and define the APIs for dynamic rules. The actual aliases that we're going to include are not yet finalized. That's a thing that will happen also in the next couple of months. About visualizations, I also saw a question in Slido, and well, it's come up in the past. In general, for us, EFX1 and visualizations was a little bit of a pain. The fact that we had to put this in stone in August 22, and then we wouldn't be able to touch it, did not allow us to make the improvements that we would like to do in EFX. So there have been difficulties around it. One of the things is the performance of the generated output. So the EFX generates XSLT, but the generated XSLT, there's only so much you can optimize with a language as simple as EFX1. So although EFX2 is still a work in progress, it will perform much better because there's several powerful features that will allow us to control the performance of the generated XSL. And although we do not get metrics yet about how much faster it will be, we will certainly measure and fine-tune and verify the performance improvement before releasing SDK2. And especially in the TED viewer, which is the main application that uses EFX2 for visualizing notices. So we are working, and we will continue working with the contractor to make optimization in TED viewer itself, as well as the EFX generated XSLTs. Things that are already in EFX2 and have a big impact in performance are the ability to use variables that reduce the amount of recalculations of XPath expressions. So this speeds up things considerably. The ability to use dictionaries, which is the equivalent of the XSL key for those that are familiar with XSLT, which allow very fast lookups. And also the ability to reuse to define callable templates and functions that the XSLT processor can optimize on, and the whole code is smaller and faster to interpret and execute. And like I said, there is also some work going on. We have been investigating the performance of TED viewer with our new contractor, and we're in the process of making some improvements there too. About barcode compatibility, Carl, I hope everything sounds okay. If a sound or anything is
it sounds okay to me. If no, that's going good. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So backward compatibility. All right. Okay, we've said this in the past. Okay, we want you all to move to SDK2 as soon as possible. And that is why, although there is a lot of things we'd like to change in a new major version of the SDK, we will hold our horses and be very careful to maintain backward compatibility. There are, nevertheless, several simplifications and harmonization and improvements that we need to do. So we will maintain the compatibility. We will not change fields.json. As much as I hate that file, I will have to keep it. We will not remove the obsolete metadata. Since we're keeping fields.json, we may as well keep it as it is. And for those that are afraid about, enforcing the business entities, no, they will be there for everybody that wants to use them. But we're not going to force you to upgrade your software to switch to the new way of doing things. Unless something along the way forces us to change this decision, this is how it's going to be. It's going to be fully backwards compatible. Nevertheless, there are some additions that we would like to make. And I think it is important to open the path for SDK 3 and for a better SDK overall. And there are some things that need to be done. Otherwise, we will not be able to help you tailor the SDK, and you will have, some eSenders that are more advanced and would like to better integrate the SDK in the systems, especially with tailoring. We'll have to find out solutions, and we don't want that. We want to help create the smoothest possible systems for you. So the point is, there is a balance to be kept here, and there are several unanswered questions yet that will need to be answered in the next 2-3 months. So are we going to include additional formats? How are we going to include them without breaking the current SDK structure? What things should we wait for? What things should we leave for SDK 3? So there are several decisions that need to be made. Too many to recount here. But whatever decision we will make make it in consultation with eSenders. There is a special group of that we started on the GitHub discussions about SDK 2. It's not really used yet. I added just a couple of questions there, but we intend to use it more and more. And please, we ask you to go and provide us your feedback, requests, and ideas about what do you need improved and changed in SDK 2. And we will try to put a solution together that allows us to maintain backward compatibility, but also make the necessary improvements for people that wants to move faster in terms of the SDK structure and metadata. So go to the GitHub discussions and please don't hesitate to start discussions about these topics on SDK 2. Just for fun, a couple of questions. I just put together a quick Slido survey related to backward compatibility. So just to get a feeling of how you think about it. Okay, EFX is changing. What about everything else? Which of the two choices that you see on your screen would be more preferable to you? Do you want us to just stick to EFX changes and leave everything else as is, or also introduce additional formats wherever needed and modernize and simplify as much as possible the SDK. Adding additional formats would probably increase the size of the SDK. So yeah, increasing the size of the SDK is not going to be fatal, of course, but it will be bigger because there's going to be some repetition there. So I see that the opinions were for a while head-to-head, but as more people are chipping into this, okay, I'm happy to see that there is an obvious preference. Oh no, there's a roller coaster here, but I think there is a preference to improve the file formats. So let's discuss about it in the GitHub discussions and figure out what it will be. Thanks about this. So the other question that I added there is, other than the FX command, which features of the SDK you would like to see improvement on? Now, the validation rules. Okay, I would like to know more about what you would like to see on the validation rules, because on the back of my hand, I cannot help but thinking that also there is non-technical persons in the audience. And I know they have been with the validation rules. I know from my own less technical colleagues that they always come and ask about better ways to see the rules. So I'm not sure about this overwhelming interest in validation rules. But yeah, we hear that, and yeah, indeed, I think we need to do some things in the validation rules, both on the technical side, but also on the less technical side. Okay, a hint of the improvements that you would consider. Performance. Okay, wait, performance. I don't understand. I'm not sure about performance. Maybe we have to discuss it. Performance for what? If it's about performance of FX, yes. If about everything else, let's see what the performance bottlenecks, because there's no code running from the SDK. So better translations of rules without double negative. Yeah, okay, we should look at that. Clear rules messages. Okay, this is more about metadata. Indeed, I was looking at the rules, the way that we do them in Schematron recently, in order to see how to design some extension to the language that allows us to describe this in simpler terms, and then generate from it Schematron or other languages that would do live validation, for example, like JavaScript. Let me read. An official for open house procedure should be provided. Include tools for eSenders tailoring. Okay, tailoring. Clear rule messages. Same rules in eFX and Schematron. Okay, transparent. Okay, all right. Okay. The messages look at the rules again, basically, both from a technical and from a user perspective. Okay, I think that your message is clear here. Visitor pattern, I'm not sure, but I would be interested on that. hear about what you mean there with the visitor pattern. Okay, I'm moving on. All right. I don't know how. Well, time-wise, Carl. Somebody else also. It's fine. Okay. Somebody else also was talking about what's coming next. Well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, because in the most focused time scale where we talked about it. So you know that the SDK2 not only is going to help us improve effects and start introducing some more robust features in the SDK itself, but it will also prepare us for going to an even better SDK3 when the time comes. So it will allow us to test our ability as a network of eSenders, our ability to adapt to major SDK changes. We will see how this change will go through the network and how fast it will be adapted, how to deal with switching a major version of the SDK, since it will be the first time we do it. It will allow us also to, I mean, it will give us an opportunity to introduce new features without enforcing them. So it will allow us to do a more gradual transition from SDK1 to SDK3. So SDK2 will be like a middle ground to a better SDK, and will give us this way more time to go to an SDK that is really mature. In SDK3, of course, we will need to simplify. We need to remove any unnecessary concepts and constructs. Break apart this huge fields JSON file, take out the rules out of there, and have the rules being expressed more clearly, separately, and more usable and translatable to different environments. We need to harmonize, look at problems that we solve in different ways currently. Well, we shouldn't. We should have solved similar problems in similar ways. Although it is a good idea to use special file formats for special cases, it's also a bad idea to have many different file formats. So maybe we will decide altogether that we want to stick with JSON, for example, instead of adding different file formats, or maybe we should find some way to translate from one file format to the other and make the SDK more usable in different environments. And also, since we're talking about SDK1 today, SDK2 soon, and SDK3 after, time flies, years go by. The definition of what software is changing. So currently, you kind of create software by prompting large language models. So we need to start thinking about making the SDK LLM friendly and enabling people to integrate it with large language models as they will come, as these are coming more and more in your workflow. So these are things that we want to consider for SDK3. Another quick poll about SDK evolution. The last time we talked, several times, I think also that was in the TED Together event. Many people requested, we need a reference implementation, and especially for the forms. We're about to make substantial changes in notices. As you know, we cannot open source in notices, but we have the eForms notice editor sample application, which we can invest further on. So we have discussed this with our contractor. We have an idea of what to do and when, and we're about to make a decision about that, whether we're going to invest on it or not. So what would you prefer? Should we put some effort in completing the eForms notice editor? Are you going to use it? Or should we focus on other things? I know it is a little bit questionable as a decision, in the sense that not everybody uses Java and the notice editor is in Java. But on the other hand, a good, clear, simple reference implementation can be used by everyone. So yeah. All right. Then Carl, as you see, maybe there is a clear preference about what to decide here. Let's see. Okay, all right, we'll take this under account. I'm also in favor of improving this. The only thing that holds me back is that we cannot do end-to-end intervention on the notice editor right away. So we will first focus on the XML generation parts, how to generate XML from the form. But I would also like there to add live validation at some point. And I would like also to make the forms more attractive in the notice editor. But yeah, we'll probably go ahead and improve the XML generation part and give you a clear reference implementation there. Okay, so the second language is C#. I would expect that it would be JavaScript, but yeah, C# is good. So therefore, whatever we do Java apparently has the most impact. So it's not so bad that we are on Java. It is bad, however, that we don't do anything for .NET. And the general tendency, I think, would be to add more JavaScript to the mix. No offense about Python. We love Python. But I see that you don't use it. And I remember some sender was also on Swift. I don't know if they're still using Swift. It seemed a little bit strange to me, but yeah. Oh, it's not in Java. More or less at the same level. Okay. Let's move on. Now, one of the things that I'm thinking about is that this whole operation is too big to be maintained only by the publications office. And I want to find ways to get the eSenders more engaged on the information systems that we use. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not engaged, especially the business side is closely communicating with Carl, and I'm sure Carl is very happy about this interaction. On the software side, however, I would like to find to put my finger on the topics where you would be more interested to work on. So the part of the notice editor that converts visual model JSON to physical. Okay, this is the thing that we're going to work on. So basically, you are implying let's do it in a way that you can also follow as it goes along, and that you can build on later. Okay. All right. Then we will try to do this as openly as possible, since we're probably doing it. I'm not sure what you mean contributing to EFX, but I find it interesting. Contributions to EFX could be translators in other programming environments. So, for example, it would be nice if we could have an EFX interpreter in JavaScript. It's not terribly difficult to implement. It's just you cannot do it while EFX is under transformation. But yes, I will be happy to work with you in getting an EFX interpreter or translator in JavaScript, for example. It would be excellent if we could do that. Or C# for that matter, since I see that C# is also so strong in the network. Then, okay, there's too many acronyms here. Okay. Now, it is not an easy task creating an MCP server, especially for something so complicated and so big as this SDK. But it's not also, so hard. But yeah, we're not probably going to work on an MCP server anytime soon. We'll probably think about it next year. Although I think that connecting the SDK and allowing an LLM to answer questions related, for example, related to comparing SDKs, migration, figuring out the different properties of different fields and all that stuff, instead of having a standard search like the one that we have now in the documentation, will help business users and also project managers, possibly even not really developers. I wouldn't think that it would help developers, but connecting the SDK with an LLM and allowing an LLM to be able to answer questions that involve searching in different versions of the SDK and making inferences is something that would be interesting for the business colleagues. Okay, let's look at that next year anyway. Let's see if there is another question. No, there is no other question. So please go to SDK to GitHub discussions and yeah, and feel free to suggest or ask anything you would like. That's it from me. Carl, maybe you want to take questions right away. The time is 11:35. So back to you, Carl.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Yanis. It's good to get some live feedback also on SDK2 and the technical questions. So indeed, not everyone in the audience is technical, but it's good. Nice, so that's a good sample, and you get a feeling of direction. So I'll just check the script. We have some. We'll be going to questions soon. I suggest we go directly to Slido questions, more Slido questions, but we had some to kick off the Q&A sessions. So this is just to get a bit of feedback. And it's just for us to know if we're catching you. although now between Yanis and I, we have to a certain extent different audiences. Different people interested in pick up the parts they want. Again, if we'd had a presentation for one of you, you would get the best rating. So that's why. Even for September, if you want to present something just to these senders, you're also welcome. Get in touch. It's good to have a bit of variety in our discussions. Okay, then let's switch to the next one about Yanis' presentation, which actually was it's quite interactive. Lots of questions for you, a lot of options. So indeed, your contribution is very valuable because you're also implementers. So I think the combined efforts will be better than if we try and do everything ourselves. And your feedback is great to help us focus. Okay, that should be enough to get some feedback. So the next question, yes, is my question. I'm not as good at embedding Slido in my presentations as Yanis, so I'd have to for later. So how do you want to do it? Actually, the last question, do nothing, would be do it in 1.14 and do nothing for 1.13. But it's more like how quickly can we patch this? Even though in principle, we want to have a principle that whenever we patch something, we don't make the rules tighter, because we don't want you to discover from one day to the next that CVS rejects your notices for some reason. But in this case, well, for a start, I don't think any people, very few people would be affected, and we would get it fixed directly. So if you wanted if you want us to delay it, maybe contact us directly as well. So already the fix in 1.14 is delay. It's more to understand what the impact is on you. So, okay, so it's pretty strong support for the patch. That's good. So at least in principle, we can patch. Then it's more a question of timing. So 30% would like it later. That's quite a few of you. So it's good if 60% of you could take it straight away. If the third of you that could be affected, maybe we should be a bit more cautious and not rush it. What I would say is if we take that second option, fix in 1.14 and backport after September, it gives you a few months to prepare. I would already, on your side, if you can, apply a rule that says to make it to keep BT 720 mandatory on your side. Yeah, it's a bit of a problem for us on e-notices too, because we use the SDK as is. So the door would still be open to e-notices 2 users, which is a bit awkward. Yeah, okay, about 32%. Okay, so we'll probably go for the second option and take a bit longer. Okay, next question, please. So this was what we presented before. So API version 3, it's basically a new URL. And if I remember rightly, one parameter to change from locale to language. So there's more to get a feeling. Had you have a chance to do it, just to update your calls, the URL mainly. So we're about halfway there. So we won't deprecate V2 without telling you, but we were hoping to do it in a couple of months' time, so we can move on. But okay, we're not there yet. We'll probably ask you again in September then. So, have you looked at the new API documentation? So that was all reworked and enhanced back in March, I think. So please have a look. You're not aware? Okay, good. Time to go. It's much richer than before, and it's the structure is much cleaner. That's more consistent. Before, the information was a little bit less well structured. I'm glad that most of you find it useful and informative. If you have questions, get in touch. If there's anything we can add, we're all ears. And the rest of you, well, those of you who still have to read it, please let us know. And this is any particular questions, anything we can improve on documentation, what are we missing? Mainly for the API, but even broader. I think this is just free text. Okay, if you don't, there's going to be a poll. You can keep Slido open until after we close the meeting. There's also feedback, the usual feedback about in general. So it's also possible to, if you don't get a chance now, you'll be able to tell us later in the next couple of days if you want to do more. Send the workshop pages with the presentations. To the page. It's the same page where you registered, so the presentation is going to be there. Presentation and minutes, separate section. Okay, in developer docs, we could probably have a section that refers to presentations and workshops and minutes. And but EFX documentation, more examples. Okay, I guess with EFX2, if we document it properly, that should enhance it. Just check in. Okay, I think on Slido we can leave this open. So when you're there, we switch, and it's just we go and look at the Q&A now. So if you're the Jenny, you could show the Q&A questions, and we can go through them chronologically. And I think the poll stays open, even if we're looking at the other ones. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll start tackling the questions. We've got a chance to catch them all. We've got some answers. Just so you know, I will read replies, but a lot of it came from my colleagues behind the scenes who have been writing replies for me. This is very much a team effort. So Yanis and I are the faces, but if you come to Luxembourg in December, you can meet more of the team. So why do we have two slightly different visualizations? One, and you notice this too, which is actually the render API. So called the TED Viewer 2022. Our TED, which has a different notice viewer. So technically they're developed in parallel. It was a question of timing when new TED came in and with eForms do it. So yeah, we're thinking about aligning them in the longer term. It's not something we can do straight away, but we first want to get into EFX2, which brings lots of benefits, and then bring the render API service up to a better level. That's our current plan, but it's a long-term thing. So at the moment, we maintain them in parallel and try and keep them aligned. So you will notice occasionally slight differences, but mainly more the look and feel. If actually content changes, we bring them aligned. Okay, so in SDK 113, the API fields have been released, but they can't be used at the moment. So when will the rules for these fields be expected to be released? Will there be a patch that will include them? If so, when is the patch version expected to be released? Indeed, I think this question came in before I did my presentation at 10:10, so the presentation has all the answers. So just to confirm, the first IPA measure was adapted last week, so that's why we couldn't use anything. And we will have a patch 113.2, and I'll preempt another question later on. Our plan is to have 113.2 out available by the end of next month, so end of July. We'll see how it goes. You'll see it coming through, but yes, the idea is to have it available quite quickly. Normally, I don't expect any procurements to use API in the next couple of weeks, so we should be okay, but it's great if we have it out, and if anyone asks you, it'll be there. Okay, do we also get, this is the implementation, do we also get a child code list for API BT 685, depending on the SDK, on the CPV codes? No, our plan is to have only one entry in that API measure code list, so the BT 685 will be which measure you're going to apply, which will only be one, but in future there could be multiple ones. And then if you choose that measure, we would then check the number of the CPV codes for the lot and check that is in a certain range. So that's how we would do the CPV check for that measure. In future, there might be another measure against, I don't know, American chicken or something. And we'll say if you're buying chicken, it has to be in those CPV ones, and it's going to be another IPI measure, the selects number we would use as a code. Okay, the next one, are we going to provide examples for SDK 1.13.2 for IPI, safe, and EDIP changes? I would say no. We hadn't thought about it, but we'll focus on getting the patch first, and that technically it can manage. So that's the quick solution and technically correct. But we should consider it for 1.14. Maybe you can have an example, mainly for API. So for safe and EDIP, okay, EDIP doesn't actually exist yet, but it'll be the same implementation. It's another regulation that will, as it were, legalize contract modifications for defense. There's no real change. You can take any contract modification, it'll look the same. The only thing that would say that it's a safe or EDIP contract modification what we discussed with the Commission just yesterday was to have in the justification for contract modification, you pick a reason and then you put some text in any contract modification. And there we'll see if the Commission will have some guidelines, what should the buyers put in that text. So say, okay, contract modification, diligent buyer could not foresee. I don't know, defense change, war in Europe. You couldn't foresee that. And the justification saying, I'm doing a contract modification as foreseen by the SAFE regulation or by the EDIP regulation. So have some standard text that buyers could use and be confident that they're declaring what they need to declare. But structurally, it's going to be the same as any other contract modification. So no, nothing good. IPI, we could have a notice that has, an IPI the fields filled in. What does short term mean? So short term for subtype 38 for SAFE and EDIP. What do I mean by short term? Technically, it's there's no distinction between short term and long term. It's more practical. So normally we would assume that if you're going to have a contract modification for the Defense Directive, you would use voluntary form E6. So that's a recommended one. If you haven't had a chance to implement E6 yet, you might have SDK 1.13, but there was no obligation to put E6. Once you have E6, if you don't have E6 yet, as from the moment we have the patch out, you would be able to use subtype 38, and we will add the Defense Directive as a valid legal basis for subtype 38. But we would expect that at some point you implement subtype E6. So we should consider if the patch you do 1.13 to allow Defense Directive for subtype 38. If we remove that in SDK 1.14, and we assume that in 1.14 you will use E6 only, and that option. So short term would be, for as long as SDK 1.13 is around. That's pretty long. But yeah, that's what we mean by short term. It's a workaround. So when is SDK 1.14 or SDK 2 going to be in use for production? So I look at 1.14 because that's where it starts. So the idea is to have a first release candidate of 1.14 by the end of September, and you can start testing it if you wish. So that's available. It should be consistent and complete. In the meantime, we will be testing it for a couple of weeks before we release the final version, and we would activate it in production. So I would say, I don't know, it depends how much testing, how it goes, if we're happy with it. Best case, a couple of weeks after September, so mid to late October, it could be out in production. That's if all goes well. For SDK 2, if you look at what Yanis was saying, we want to make sure SDK 2.0 has the same legal business equivalent with SDK 1.14. So SDK 2.0 will be out as an alpha. It'll be evolving. by October, it will be able to make sure it's aligned with SDK 1.14. And then when you're happy, for those of you using SDK 2, and we're happy that SDK 2 has everything we want in the EFX, and SDK 2 would be released sometime during the autumn, but keeping the same business content as 1.14. I would say with the exception of maybe some dynamic rules that we would add to SDK 2. First to check they're working, also to benefit from those dynamic rules. So for example, if I'm doing a change notice and I point to the previous notice, the dynamic rule will check that the previous notice has been published. Today we do get some rubbish links. It is possible to say I'm changing that notice and in fact you point to the wrong one. Or this is a result for that competition and you point to a competition that doesn't exist. It's possible today, a dynamic rule could check that. So SDK 2 would allow us to do those things and we can't do that with SDK 1.14. So yes, that's, I would say, October for production. Okay, contract modification, defense and security. I'm going to answer those two questions together. They're quite long, they're good questions. So why not create a new notice of type 41? So it keeps the logical structure of the eForms regulation. People complain about the complexity, but in this case, adding a form would be simpler. And if we want to reduce the number of forms, we should do it properly. So when the directives are revised, technically, the new subtype 41 could be a copy of E6 and 38 and then not create any burden for implementers. So to answer that together, in fact, E6 is already the right form for the defense directive, and even it's a valid legal basis. So E6 is already there. E6 was already based quite heavily on 38 for Directive 2024. And so 41 is pleasing. It maintains a number, but those numbers don't actually mean anything. I mean, we created PMC, CI, X1, X2. There were 40 forms. Now we have 46, which are eForms. They don't actually mean anything. So if the one for defense is called E6 instead of 41, there's no semantic difference. It's just a pleasing sequence. So we'll stick with E6. Plus, it means it's already in SDK 1.13. There's zero burden for implementers. You just take one for 13 and you can use it. So, well, burden of putting it in place in the first place, but there's no additional thing, no SDK version and so on. So that's why it's E6, because it's already there, except it's just not voluntary anymore. It's been legalized by SAFE and EDIP. Okay, to jump to the next one. If you've implemented SDK 1.13, do you have to do anything when the patch is applied? 1.13.2. So 1.13.2, when we put it into production and we activate it, that will mean that CVS will have different rules. So there will be changes in the code lists. There will be changes in code lists. There will be changes in the rules, and there will be changes in the view templates. Depending on how you use those components, they might have an impact on you. When you send us a 1.13 notice, if you're not using an API, nothing happens, no problem. If you're not trying to use, so there's no immediate impact on you. What could be is have a look on your side if there's any impact from those component changes for you. Then you would have to implement them in your system. So you would make use of these new functionalities. So if you're using view templates, for example, you need to take the patch to get those new business terms in your view templates. If you just code in the API, it'll start using them. So case by case. But if you do nothing, normally there should be no problem. The one CVS checks the SDK minor version, not the patches. So 1.13 is 1.13. So when will SDK 1.13.2 be available? As I mentioned before, we want to do that by the end of July. That's the plan. So what does short-term option for subtype no, sorry. I'm jumping around. Removing parts. Yeah, sorry, I'm in the wrong place. So removing parts. Is this a possible change for the Third Amendment? Is it the intention to switch to lots for notices that currently use parts? That's a proposal. So this proposal comes more. It's more of a grassroots proposal. It's not something the member states are rushing to do. But we currently have that. But that would be the main idea. Yes, indeed. So from a data point of view, a part and lot, we wouldn't refer to parts, we would use lots. So there are only three planet subtypes that use parts, and where we see parts today, we would put lots. Implicitly, it would have to be implicit, have that implicit understanding that the lots you see in a planning subtype and planning notice are not necessarily the same ones you see in the competition. So I'm planning to have 5 lots, but the competition might only have 2, or I'm planning to have 5 lots, and in fact I have 2 competitions. So it's not always the same lots, but that's what used to happen in the old forms, and I think it was clear enough to everyone. And in most cases, the lots you have in a planning usually end up the same as competitions. But from a point of data quality and granularity, we would have to switch like that, and then the schema would be a bit simpler as well. Okay, in preview, it seems that notices are put in lawfulness warning if they're not created in an official language of a member state. And for testing purposes, that can be a bit annoying. It'd be great if the rule could be removed in preview, or if one could bypass the warning via e-notices too. We don't have, sorry, just a second. Sorry. We don't have a lawfulness check for languages. I mean, not yet. I mean, I'd like to have an algorithm that helps us, but the lawfulness check is a country of the buyer. So let us know if you're triggering any other warning about language. Indeed, if you're putting in your buyer is in your Bangkok embassy, it will trigger it. But if you're somewhere in the EEA or Canada country, there's no lawfulness warning. So no, we're not doing that. It would be difficult to have a different rules in preview than in production. Normally we want production and preview to be the same. So you can test as it were in production. We don't have any particular need. So yeah, don't produce unlawful notices if you don't want to try that out. I think it's easy enough to stay in Europe. But get in touch if you have those cases. Okay, please be wary of activating too much lawfulness warnings in preview. A lot of time we use dummy data, lorem ipsum in test notices. Be ashamed to test if these would consistently line up blocked lawfulness warning state. Yep, that's true. Yeah, so today we don't tailor the rules per environment. Yeah, dummy data could also exist in real languages. So yeah, that's good to bear in mind. Don't worry, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen probably this year, but we'll keep you in the loop to make sure we have algorithms that make sense. Yeah, okay. Yeah, could be that if we have an algorithm that the algorithm check-in is switched off could be switched off, for example. So that would be something we can bear in mind, that we could play with it. In any case, the algorithm part is something we want to, something that can be refined relatively easily. That probably wouldn't depend on the SDK in the same way. So you wouldn't have to wait for an SDK to change the lawfulness warnings. Would be able to tweak it as we go along. When the release candidate available soon, again, I think between release candidate and the final version, it should be quite short. So I think end of May, will that be the release candidate of the final version? I couldn't tell you yet. We only got the decisions yesterday, so give us a chance to do it. But yeah, I would say during July we'll have a release candidate. Who is using EFX templates versus SDK metadata files, fields, JSON, notice types? I guess a view template. So who? So on our side, the render API, what we call TED Viewer 2022. If you call the API, that uses the EFX view templates. If you preview something in eNotices 2, that calls the viewer and the EFX2 templates. And we know several eSenders call the render API directly from their own applications. So it's a bit like eNotices 2, you use it as your own viewer. And a handful of eSenders use the view templates, the EFX, and have their own viewer. So they interpret the EFX and generate their own viewer from that. Compared to the other method, compared to the other metadata files, I think pretty much everyone uses fields JSON. It's quite difficult to get away from that, the schema, the rules. So that's almost the core of what you have to send. Notice types, I think it's, if I remember from the presentation I gave in June when we surveyed you, notice types are quite popular because it means you get the screen layouts as well. But it's EFX templates is possibly the least used, partly because you can call the API directly.
If I may,
sure.
The question says who, so we don't know who. We have to ask.
We know who from 22 eSenders that replied to our survey, so we do know personally who they are.
So maybe we have to provide this information separately.
Yeah, we'll get in touch if you want to know who, but I don't know if that's a general question, is like, what is the usage in general? So have a look at my June presentation for the numbers.
And using EFX templates or EFX, because there is no VS SDK metadata in EFX templates. I mean, I don't understand the versus of one of the other. They work together and not, one doesn't replace the other. But the important thing here is the calling our APIs is not using EFX. Using EFX is I'm using some translator locally, and I am translating EFX either to XSLT or to some other language and executing it locally. So that's how I understand who is using EFX. So I don't know which eSenders do that. I know that we have a survey, so maybe we could use those results to answer this question.
Yeah, the pure numbers in the presentation I did last in June. Okay, it was 22, and they're like 51 of you, so it's representative, but you can do it. But yeah, they're not. Yeah, indeed, how you use it varies a bit. Okay, I'll leave the next one to you, Yanis, about EFX grammar. So
yes, indeed,
that's coming.
We will have extensive documentation in EFX2, much better than what we had in EFX1. Certainly, we will. Yeah, that's it.
And the next one about visitor pattern, I think, was to reply to your question. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. This came back again. Thank you for pointing out that it is on 1007.3 in GitHub. I'm writing this down and I will get back to you there. We will talk about it on GitHub. Thank you for pointing it out to me.
The next one, how many EFX use EFX in full SDK? What is percentage? I'll point again to the to my presentation last time. It gives you percentages of the survey what we got back. So it varies. I mean, EFX is EFX for rules and EFX for view templates. So that's two separate uses. And full SDK, again, to use all the components. So we know some eSenders use all the components, some use part of it. So it's a little bit pick and mix. Pretty much everyone uses a schema because otherwise you can't send us anything. But beyond that, it varies quite a lot. So, okay, and the next one's for you, Anne. It's about breaking apart fields JSON in SDK 3.
Well, yeah, I was reading this question here. So basically, the idea says that forcing everyone to change along for the sake of change does not feel very efficient. So first of all, we're never going to change anything for the sake of change. We're not going to try to unblock things, improve things, move ahead. The changing, breaking down fields JSON is not a change that is comparable to all the huge changes we've together been through, and we will go through in the future, is negligible. And if it happens, it will happen in 2027. So fields JSON will be, by that time, a 5-year-old design. So how many years should we keep an outdated design until a change feels efficient? We are talking about a change in an information system. So I understand your point of view, but at some point we need to draw a line and we need to move ahead. So I think 5 years for revisiting a design is quite a long time, at least at the level of information systems.
Yeah, and I guess the same information will be presented differently, probably presented in a better way. So it would allow you to rework what you've done to find the information better, and it will be richer. So there might be other things you want to retrieve that would not there in fields JSON. So yeah, there's not a rush. That's okay. Okay, Aitor, about time zone and TED. So yeah, my first answer is go to the user survey and get your customers to give the feedback. That's good. So the customer complains about the time zone info in TED. So in TED, you cannot change the time zone in which you see times. It depends on what was sent. And you cannot know if the supplier accessed TED from Ireland, Greece, or Germany. Should there not be an option for the time zone, just the language? So in the notice itself, you put the time zone, and that's ambiguous. So if you say UTC +2, it's always UTC2, and it doesn't matter where you're in the world. UTC2 always means UTC2. In TED recently, they've added the labels saying it's Central European time or Eastern European time, Central European summertime, so that at least you know that what UTC2 is where you are or not. I think the vast majority of European suppliers and buyers should know which time zone they're in, and with those the big three is 97% of all notices. So yeah, there is an option for the time zone in every time. What you could have on TED in the user interface is something that is nicer, that says +2 for you is, in an hour's time, and interprets the UTC and tells you what time it is for you. So that was a functionality for TED. But at a notice level, the data is ambiguous. And then it's a question of display and how we can make something a bit more user-friendly potentially there. But okay, if you put it in a PDF and you say this is the timestamps notices, that's just going to put UTC because you don't know who's going to read it when. But from the user interface, the dynamic parts, maybe there's something that could be done. Okay, I've got a couple more. So if the fix SDK 1.13.2 will come in a few weeks, can you guarantee a full backwards compatibility 1.3.0 and 1.3.1? Yeah, we'll test that, but as far as we can see, there's nothing that will break because the view templates that will not break anything. So adding those two BTs in the view templates won't break anything. We're safe there. Allowing a change in a label in E6, that won't break anything. Allowing an additional legal basis for subtype 38 won't break anything. Adding to a code list that says yes won't break anything. There was one option that we considered, is the code list that had the measures. Today it says empty, and we're going to remove empty and put in the select number. So in theory, by removing something from the code list, you could break something. But because today the other rules make it impossible to fill in that code list because you are forced to say false to IPI, in fact, no one has been able to fill that in. So that theoretical case is impossible to fill thanks to the rules. So there would be no risk of backwards compatibility. But we'll give it a couple of tries, send some 113 ones, check if they still validate, but we're not expecting any surprises. So the good thing is that the scope is quite small. And for the other thing about adding the schematon rules, I think the safest is to put them into 114, then patch them 113.3 in September, and then again we'll check that carefully to make sure that it works. But in that case, it would not be fully backwards compatible because there would be some cases people who are removing the tender value in their contract modifications, they would not be accepted. But that's just a validation check at the end. So that's, but 113.2, yes, will be fine. Okay, is it allowed to use BT300 for IPI information? So, let's see, my colleague's just replying and getting some replies behind the scenes that you can't see. So no, there's no BT300 in the group for IPI information, but you could use BT300 at the procedure or lot level, so the general additional information field, even if it's not directly related. So you could say, oh, okay, I'm using IPI here. That's not the intention. So if you want a strict interpretation of the eForms regulation, you should put fields in the fields that are made available. But legally, from an IPI point of view, that regulation probably says you must provide the information in the notice, so you'd be covered, I would say, legally, even if not structurally. The idea that we have specific IPI fields in the notice is that reporting can be done. So this is when the Commission wants to assess how IPI is working, they'll say how many procedures were affected, what were the exceptions, blah, blah, blah. If you put it on BT300, it won't get picked up. It's just plain text. If you use the fields, it will get picked up. So I would say try to use, at worst, use subtype. No, you have no choice. Move to SDK 113 to offer it to your buyers, yeah. So that's a recommendation. But if anyone really needs to IPI, I guess it's okay. But that's a legal decision. Okay, how can I register to the eForms workshop that is in July and August? Yeah, eForms is not for this group, so it's not for eSenders. It's for members of the expert group on e-procurement, and that's run by European Commission. And that's a limited group that are representatives from member states. The member states decide who goes to that one. And there were a couple of additional participants, but that's exceptional. So it's in a way, it's a closed gate. It's a closed group. It's not open to everyone. The good thing is the workshop themselves, the agenda, the minutes, and the issues are open. So at least you can see what's going on, and you can, if you want, contribute to the issues. But the decision-making part, the workshop itself, is a closed group. So if you're not in yet, you're not going to get in that easily. And even we had to ask to add some of our colleagues. Okay, so Aito, the concern is not the ambiguity in the actual. That's what you told the customer, but they claim it's confusion for suppliers and TED. So the position is go to talk to TED so they make it easier for their users. Okay, yes, so it is a TED user interface issue to try and make it easier for them. So the suppliers know when the deadline is, for example. Yeah, mod display. Okay, yeah, so TED front end. With the slow-moving changes on the SDK, it finally feels like it's gone past puberty and is surely maturing into adulthood. Congrats. Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. Yeah, the teen years, I think we're moving into young adulthood, just about. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And it's we're glad to be here with you. As our old head of unit, Manuel used to say, we're all in it together, so whatever we can get done together, the better. Okay, I think there are no more questions. No more questions open. Yeah, we'll leave this open. I'll say we'll leave this question open now. We'll close the session, and you can can they answer them one by one afterwards? Sorry, I don't know how the Slido works. No, you can reply them now. Yes, yes. Please go ahead. Yeah, we have 2 Slido questions to wrap up. So if you have anything now, you can. If this question moves on and you don't have anything to say, don't worry. You can say afterwards, what did you like about the event? Do you have any suggestions for next time? So this is just if you want to share it now with us and with the group, just to get some first feedback. The current setup is satisfying. Thank you. We realized we could squeeze it into a morning so we don't split over lunch because the again, the teenage issues are less intense, less to talk about, and it feels we're getting more into business as usual. Getting in touch with you every couple of months to be where. Okay, let's move on to the next question. The final question. It's just the usual. Wrap it up. What did you like? The one-word one, just to get a feeling again. Concise. Great. That's good. I usually think I speak too much, so I'm glad that it's too much and details to the point. Good. Yanis, we're on form. Great. Okay, good chance to ask. Yeah, your questions are always rich, always good. We won't always have answers to everything, but at least we know where the problems are. Okay, let's leave it there. So yeah, stay on the slide if you want. That'll stay open for a few days. We won't share it now. And okay, then that's it for today. I personally am off on holiday for 2 weeks, so I'm going to take my break. I hope some of you are also taking a break at some point over the summer or after the summer when it's not so hot. And we'll see you again at the end of September. So the slides are up or will be up shortly. This recording, give us a couple of days to edit it. We also put it up. And then the minutes, okay, give us a couple of weeks to just bring together. Not too many questions, but just so we get clean ones, a clean reply. Perfect, Jenny, thanks. So that's a link to today, where the presentations we will later, and the future events as well. So pay attention for that. Great. Thank you very much and have a good day.